What's happening, everyone? It's the Cassius Morris Show. Thank you for tuning in for episode number 186, a special Sopranos themed podcast. You know, anybody who's been following my social media and or listening to this podcast for the past few months probably saw this coming. Joseph Gannascoli, aka Vito, joins us today. If you've been listening and watching, you'll know that I started watching The Sopranos at the top of the pandemic lockdown. And I think anybody who started watching anything that they enjoyed at that point began to binge watch it. I think it only made sense at that period of time. So that's what I did. I basically binge watched The Sopranos until the end of it throughout the period of a couple months, and I greatly enjoyed it. So naturally, I made it a goal of mine to have somebody from the show on my show for the podcast. So it was a goal. The only other show that I really have a goal to interview people from personally, I mean, I want to do plenty for you guys, is Breaking Bad. That's the only other show that I really was entertained by on that level. Two quick things before we jump into this. As I said, I have watched The Sopranos one time over, and to avoid having the ending spoiled because the show had come out so long ago, I didn't do a deep dive into all of these characters in terms of the behind the scenes of the show. Obviously, for this interview, I did tons of research on Joseph Gannascoli, but my point in saying that about the show is that I made it an effort not to delve into the deep things about behind the scenes on set that a fan could find out that the average person wouldn't know. These are things that I hadn't quite delved into. So, and now that I announced that this interview came out, there's a bunch of tough questions that are coming up that I wish I could have addressed before. So all I want to say is that I wasn't aware of these allegations. Again, I was trying to protect the ending of the show. And again, a lot of these things, there's hearsay on message boards, people talking about things, and they're even having trouble bringing up sources. So I'm not the guy to be basing my opinion off of something like that. I don't know the level of truth of any of this. And my point in bringing it up is that if I had been aware of any of this before, I would have 100% asked about it on the air and cleared it up on the air, because I'm always here to ask the tough questions. I'm not here to do an infomercial for anybody or do bubblegum sort of entertainment. So hopefully I'll get the opportunity to speak with Joe on another occasion to answer some of you guys' questions on that front. Real quick before we jump into this interview, this episode of the Cassius Morris Show is powered by Young Atlas, an incredible media and talent collective out of Harlem, New York City. And I highly encourage you guys to go and check them out. They have incredible content on their website for music, entertainment. Make sure to go check out my article on Young Atlas. There's a link in the description of this audio and or video broadcast. And you can hear me talking about my journey so far through media, my future goals in this business, talk about comedy, talk about music, even some talk about my favorite movie and television shows, including The Sopranos. So make sure you go check that out in the link below. And with that squared away, please enjoy my interview with Joe Gannascoli from The Sopranos. Joe, how you doing?
Hey, what's going on, Cassius?
Hey, not too much. Great to speak with you. Thanks so much for taking the time.
My pleasure. How you doing? You got a great name.
Hey, thank you very much. Yeah, I know you're a big sports guy, so definitely named after one of the greats.
I'm named after, can you see that? Cassius, he's blocked by...
What's that down there? Let me see. Oh, I see Ali back there under the horns. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Looking
so what's
good.
happening?
Hey, not too much. I just wanted to utilize our time again. Very appreciative of it. I'm an avid viewer of The Sopranos, so I actually had a lot of questions for you about it. And
Sure.
I wanted to go back to the beginning. So is it true, if my memory serves me right, that you were not originally cast as Vito? You were cast as a different character?
Correct. There was one scene in the bakery, episode 8, season 1. I played Gino, trying to get some bread.
Yes, Gino. And so at that point, that was a one-off role, I'll assume, correct?
Yeah, I got really lucky, thank God. Changed my life. They brought me back as Vito.
So then when you came back as Vito, how exactly did that come about? Did you reach out to them to come back on the show, or were they interested in calling you?
Oh, they called me.
Okay. And at that point, because I remember you saying that you had pitched the character of maybe, okay, we're going to have a mobster who maybe ends up becoming gay. So how did that come about?
Oh, that came on sometime in maybe like season 4, where I approached the writers from a book I was reading called Murder Machine, and there was a mobster that was gay. So I thought it would be sort of interesting to do, and thank God they did it.
Right. And so what was your inspiration for trying to add that to the script? Was it often that people on the show would suggest things for their character?
No, I don't think they really did. As a matter of fact, it's the only suggestion they ever took about a character. They used mine. The inspiration was, I thought it was interesting, something you never saw, and also trying to get, more acting time and really stretch, to be an actor playing something that's obviously not me, what I'm used to.
So what was the reception from the writers and the cast when you first brought them this idea? Were they receptive to it at first, or did it take some convincing?
I just brought it to them, and they said, "Oh, interesting." And then they said they'd read the book, and nothing came about it for about a year and a half, 2 years maybe. And then they asked me what the name of the book was, and then I knew that they were thinking about it.
Okay. And then, so I would take it that the cast took well to it because, like you said, they sort of just did what was in the script. They weren't really suggesting that much at the time.
Yeah, I mean, the cast really didn't say anything, much. I mean, they thought it was like, ballsy of me to do, being a Brooklyn guy. It's not something that back then, we're talking 15, 16 years ago, 17. So it's not like it is today. So, but I'm glad I did, like I said.
Exactly. Were you ever approached by gay people or people who knew gay people after watching the show with any thoughts on it? Because your role really went into, I think, what I would imagine it would be like for a closeted person. It was very realistic.
Yeah, I got quite a few emails at the time. They didn't reach out to social media like they do now. So I got emails saying, "Oh, I'm in the same situation. Can we meet for a drink?" So I had to straighten them out. I said, we can meet for a drink, but only if you bring your sister.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, to sort of weed it out a little bit. When you're playing this role, were there points of it that became challenging just due to the depth of it? Or was it like, I'm just an actor, I'm just doing my thing?
Yeah, there was certainly some moments, where I had to kiss the guy. That took a little, I just did it. I didn't want to think too much about it. I didn't just try to make it as realistic as possible.
Exactly, because you couldn't really have a really in-depth gay character without some sort of element of that. So that totally makes sense. When you're thinking back on that period, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of your time on The Sopranos? Is there any standout moments or maybe scenes with this particular actor that stand out?
Well, that whole arc for my character, where the first part of season 6, I think was 11 episodes, and I did 9 of them. And if I wasn't in it, they were talking about me. We really revolved around my character, which was really fun to do and very challenging. Thank God that the guy who played Johnny Cakes was a guy I knew from the city. Yeah. So that made it a little more comfortable, and we had fun with it. Then he's passed on.
Oh, rest in peace.
Yeah, rest in peace is right.
How long had you guys known each other at the time, and how did you meet?
We met through a friend who first got me interested in acting, and we both did a little film together. And I always admired his work. He was a fireman who turned into acting. And when I walked in, I was just glad to see that it was him that I was going to be with,
Definitely, because you knew him. So you're telling me in real life, not only was this guy a fireman, but I obviously had interest in firemen and connections in real life.
Yes.
Wow.
Well, no, I didn't have interest in firemen in real life. He happened to be a fireman, but my friend, we did a film together, and I sort of knew him. I wasn't friends with him, but I didn't have any interest in Fireman.
Okay, my mistake. But he happened to be a fireman, so that was the
Yeah,
true part of it. And the reason I say
yeah.
it is because as a viewer who has now looked into it and looked into the people on it, it seems like there's so many parts of the show that are true to the actors. Do you feel like that was something that was by design by David Chase?
Yeah, I think that what was ever, happening in your life. I had bad hips at the time. I worked with that limp. They made a reference to it in the show. Certain things that are true happening to the actor in real life. They used, in the show.
Definitely. Yeah. And you talk about the intensive work that you did, especially on season 6, incredible performance. How long would it take at that
Thank
point?
you.
Were you on the shoots with month-long episode shoots?
I'm observed. I don't understand.
Sure. Like how long would it take in terms of shooting an episode where you were intensively in it? Would it take a month for one episode, 2 months?
No, 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 no. It took about 8 days,
Wow.
but they were long days if you were in a lot of it. A lot of the episode, um, you know, 10, 12, 14 hours. It took about 8 days to shoot about 55 minutes.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
incredible. And in terms of being in New Jersey, of course, you guys were actually there. How many people would you have crowds of people watching you guys when you would shoot outside?
Oh, yeah. It was like, almost like the Beatles. I mean, we had huge crowds wherever we shot, and that
Wow.
was always fun. We take pictures with people, and not like now. And not everybody had camera phones back then.
Mhm.
But sign autographs and people bought regular cameras. So if we were interior, they'd all be outside. If we were outside, well, of course, it's all blocked off. But most of us went over to meet the fans and talk to them and say hello.
Nice. So you would actually be able to talk with them. And so let's say you're walking around New Jersey on a day that you're not shooting, or let's say walking around New York City. How many people recognize you? And do they recognize you and say Vito, or do they recognize you as Joe?
Um, I'm in Long Island, which
Okay.
is New York. Everybody knows me in my neighborhood. Everybody knows me in Long Island. They certainly know me from all the charity work I just did for the pandemic.
Yes.
Yeah. So pretty much they know me by Joe now, but some
Mhm.
don't. They still call me Vito.
Yeah, because there's still that connection with the show. Do you feel like there was maybe more connection because you mentioned how not everybody had camera phones? Maybe when they couldn't see the actors' personal lives because now it's so broadcasted on social media, and you see that they're not really that character.
I don't know. I've always been very approachable, and people knew me as like a regular guy.
Hmm.
So, my neighborhood in Brooklyn and even Long Island, wherever I am, most of the time. As a matter of fact, I'll always ask someone if they want to take a picture because sometimes, they don't want to bother me. They don't want to, infringe. And
Hmm.
I know that they want to. And 9 times out of 10, or probably even more than that, 99.9 out of 100, they'll say, "Oh, I didn't want to ask," or "I'd love to. Do you mind?" So I'll take the camera and I'll do a selfie with them.
That's awesome. Well, that's really good to hear for sure for people in the area. One quote that I've heard very frequently from cast members on The Sopranos is that when you did a scene with James Gandolfini, you came away a better actor. Is there anything you can tell me about doing scenes with Gandolfini?
Um, I had maybe only a few really intimate scenes with him. He's usually a bigger group.
Hmm.
Um, but, just to see him work I saw mostly what it worked when it came on screen on
Right.
the show. I didn't really interact with him that much. But he was always very accommodating and himself also. He was a regular guy, down to earth guy. Always made you feel comfortable. He touched me in a few ways, and I wasn't very close with him. But he
Hmm.
came to my wedding with his son, And he talked, said very nice things. Most of the cast members talked, said nice things. He came to my restaurant. You know, I was a chef before an actor.
Yeah.
And he was sick, and it was a cold, rainy night. He stayed until everybody got, and there was a line out the door down the block. CNN covered it.
Wow.
And he made sure that everybody got a picture and an autograph. And then when that gay thing came out, he said, listen, he took me aside and he said, listen, if you're uncomfortable about doing this, we'll go talk to David and, see what he says. And, if you don't want to do it, we'll talk to him. But I said to him, I said, look, it's what I asked for. And I'm sure they're going to do it very tastefully. And I'm glad that they did it. It's not what I had in mind the way they did it, but I'm glad that they did it. Made them a lot more sympathetic.
Yes. In terms of David Chase, you mentioned Gandolfini wasn't exactly on the set a lot because I guess he had a lot of lines to learn and, obviously a lot of things to do. Was David Chase frequently around or was he more sort of behind the scenes?
Well, I would say behind the scenes. I mean, if it was a big scene, he was there. Every once in a while, he directed an episode, but I'm sure he was up in the writer's room, writing the next episode. Every once in a while, he came down to set, but, we were always on location, whether it be in Jersey, whether it be, if it was in studio and he was there, then he'd poke his head around to see what's going on, take a look at the camera and so on.
Okay, so he was mostly one of the writers. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Sort of kept his head behind the scenes. You mentioned how you had, I guess, some brief interaction with James Gandolfini's son. I'm curious if you have any reaction to him being in the upcoming movie portraying his father.
I think that hopefully, and I'm sure he's going to do a fantastic job. Something's going to make his fathers proud, all of us proud. We all look forward to the movie, as any Soprano fan does. And it just renews interest. It's a whole new genre or generation of kids that were too young to, I have 16, 17, 18-year-old kids, always come up to me. I just watched it. I wasn't allowed. I was a kid. So that's going to regenerate all the new interest in it, which is pretty cool.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I sent in some photographs of him at my wedding with his father, which was beautiful.
Oh, so you guys keep in touch somewhat?
Only through social media.
Mm-hmm. Are there other cast members that you keep in touch with the odd time?
Only really one, John Fiore, who played Gigi. Mm-hmm. He was my favorite guy. But other than that, no, not really.
Fair enough. I guess life goes on. How about watching the show? Have you sat down and watched any episodes in recent times?
It's hard for me because watching myself walk, I remember the pain that I was in. And then seeing Jimmy, it's very sad.
Yeah.
So not usually. I'm always tempted to go back because it's so well done to refresh it. But I always stop and don't.
Mm-hmm. It must be a pretty emotional experience because I think when you give so much on camera, it must take a certain amount out of you.
Yeah, it just brings back a lot of memories. You see scenes and you think about what was happening that day. And, it just brings back memories, great memories. And even the guy that passed away, you think about him. And there's been quite a few people since that have been on the show that have passed on. So it's very sad.
Definitely a walk down memory lane. Well, it's incredible, and it's incredible what you guys did. Right before we wrap up, I did just want to touch on your work as a chef. Obviously, a very well-known and renowned chef before your acting days. What are you doing in terms of cooking now? Is that still a passion for you?
Well, I do private cooking parties, which were really taken off before the pandemic. I was a chef. I worked in Manhattan. I lived in New Orleans. I lived in Los Angeles when I first started acting, and I worked in restaurants. So those private parties where usually Soprano fans, I cook from maybe 20 to up to 40 people. I do a big antipasta, a pasta, and then a chicken dish. Unless it's special requests, like I got one coming up, I want fish also.
Nice.
And I do a Q&A, I tell stories, I take pictures. So I'm there about 10 hours, which is a lot of fun. And because I was a chef during this whole pandemic, I wanted to help the restaurants in my neighborhood that were struggling to reopen, trying to stay open.
Mm-hmm.
So I started a GoFundMe, which I raised about $35,000.
Wow.
And I bought food from all the restaurants in my neighborhood. And then I delivered them to nursing homes, hospitals, police departments, fire departments, post offices, sanitation, all the essentials. I did that. I did about over 100 deliveries, pickups and deliveries. So I ordered the food, I picked it up, and I delivered it myself.
Wow, that's incredible. And I know you have a passion and love for law enforcement. I've seen you discuss that. So as somebody who has a history of that in the family, I thank you for that. And thank you for your work there as well.
Yeah, it's so hard to, as a matter of fact, I just put up my my blue line American flag today. And they're saying, am I going to get repercussion? I don't live in that kind of neighborhood. I live in, a great neighborhood. But I said, I got it. With those guys going through, in any walk of life, there's some bad apples. You know what I mean? It could be,
Yeah.
In the church, it could be religion, could be teachers, could be anybody. The pressure that those guys are under, and for the most part, it's guys that are just being opportunistic, so they could rob, loot, do criminal activity, and what those guys got to go through every day. They're trying to be provoked so they can get it on video, so they can sue the city, make money. It's just terrible. It really is. And what goes on in New York, I give those guys credit, man, every day. So they have my respect, utmost respect.
100%. And Joe, thank you so much for your time. I greatly appreciate it, and stay safe.
I enjoyed it. Thank you very much, my friend.
And there you have it. My exclusive interview with Joseph Gannascoli, a.k.a. Vito Spatafore from The Sopranos, the greatest television show of all time. What an honor. Make sure you go check out all of our guests' links in the description below. Follow him on all of his platforms. Of course, make sure to go check out youngatlas.world, and thank you to them for powering this interview. Many thanks to everybody over at Young Atlas. And of course, make sure to follow me on all of my platforms, but most importantly, wherever you're listening to this podcast right now, be it Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, please hit that subscribe button and also leave a review or a comment if you can. Follow me on Twitter at Cassius Morris, Facebook.com/Cassius Show, and Instagram at Cassius Morris _. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, this is Cassius Morris saying, rock on.